Hey everyone, my name is Jenny, and I live in a small town called Brooksville. It's a quiet place, the kind where everyone knows everyone else's business. We've got one main street, a couple of diners, a gas station, and a post office. It's not the sort of place where you'd expect anything bad to happen, but bad things can happen anywhere. I was 22. Fresh out of college, and trying to figure out what to do with my life. I had a job at the local library, which was perfect for someone like me who loves books. My parents lived nearby, and I spent a lot of time with them. Life was simple and safe. Then one evening, everything changed. I was driving home from my parents' house. It was late, around 11 p.m., and the roads were deserted. There was a shortcut I often took. A narrow road that cut through a patch of woods. I'd driven that road 100 times without incident, but that night I noticed a car following me. It was an old beat-up sedan with one headlight out. At first, I thought it was just someone else taking the shortcut, but then it got closer, tailgating me aggressively. I started to panic. I sped up, but the car stayed right on my bumper. There was no way to call for help. I didn't have cell service in that part of town. I tried to lose the car by taking a sharp turn onto a dirt road I'd never used before. That's when I made a mistake. I lost control of my car, and it skidded off the road, crashing into a tree. The impact dazed me, but I was conscious enough to see the other car pull up behind me. A man got out, and even in the darkness, I could see he was tall and muscular, with a menacing presence. I tried to get out of my car, but the door was jammed from the crash. He approached my car, and I screamed, hoping someone might hear me. He smashed my window with a crowbar and dragged me out. I fought back, but he was too strong. He tied my hands and gagged me, then threw me into the trunk of his car. The drive felt like it took forever. I could feel every bump and turn, trying to remember the route, but my mind was foggy from the crash and fear. Eventually, we stopped, and he hauled me out of the trunk. I could see we were at an old, abandoned farmhouse. It looked like it had been deserted for years, overgrown with weeds and vines. He dragged me inside, down into a basement that was cold and damp. The walls were lined with shelves of strange objects, animal skulls, jars of preserved organs, and other macabre items. There were cameras set up around the room, pointing at an old wooden chair in the center. He forced me into the chair and secured me with chains. I was terrified, crying, and begging for my life, but he just smiled and turned on the cameras. That's when he started talking to someone or something that I couldn't see. He was speaking in a language I didn't understand, chanting and making strange gestures. Then he stripped me naked and bound me tightly to the chair. The cold air against my skin made me shiver uncontrollably. He left me like that for hours, occasionally coming back to whisper in that strange language, sometimes laughing to himself. For the next 15 days, I lived in a nightmare. The man was a Satanist, and he was live streaming my torture on the dark web. He'd cut me, burn me, and do unspeakable things, all while chanting and performing rituals. He barely fed me, just enough to keep me alive. I was losing hope, convinced I was going to die in that basement. What made it worse was that he streamed me naked, earning a lot of money from sick viewers who got off on my suffering. After the broadcasts, he would pour blood on my naked body, playing with it and laughing. It was like living in hell. But one night, something changed. He left the basement door unlocked. I don't know if it was a mistake or if he was testing me, but I knew it was my only chance. I waited until I heard him go upstairs. Then I struggled against the chains with all my remaining strength. The cuffs around my wrists were loose enough from the weight I'd lost that I managed to slip one hand free. I crept up the stairs, moving as quietly as possible. My heart was pounding in my chest, and every creak of the floorboards felt like it would give me away. But I made it to the front door and ran as fast as I could into the woods. I stumbled through the trees, not knowing where I was going, just trying to get as far away as possible. I eventually found a road and flagged down a passing car. The driver, a woman, called the police and stayed with me until they arrived. The police raided the farmhouse and arrested the man. His name was David Mullins, and he was already wanted for several murders. They found evidence of his other victims in the basement, but I was the only one who had survived. I've tried to move on with my life, but the scars are still there, both physical and mental. But I'm alive, and I'm determined to stay that way. I never thought my curiosity would lead me to such a nightmare. I'm Jake, a 28-year-old IT worker from a small town in America known for its strong internet connections. This is my story, and I hope it warns others who think the dark web is just a place for curious people. It all started one boring evening. I was looking online for something new when I found a chat about the dark web. People were sharing their creepy experiences, and I couldn't help but check it out. I had heard the scary stories, but I didn't really believe them. So I decided to take a look. I installed the software needed to get into the dark web and started exploring. At first, it was just strange sites and odd forums, but then I found a link that seemed to promise something truly disturbing. The title was Eternal Nightmares, and it made me curious. When I clicked the link, it took me to a dark page with a single video feed. The quality was poor, but what I saw made me freeze. It was a live stream, not a recording. The camera showed a dim room where creepy, ghost-like creatures were tormenting people who were tied up. These creatures looked nothing like humans. They were twisted and eerie, with hollow eyes. They moved in strange, jerky ways and made horrifying sounds as they tortured their victims. The victims were scared and helpless. The creatures mocked them, hurting them both physically and mentally. It was more terrifying than anything I had ever imagined. I quickly shut down the browser, trying to forget what I had seen, but the images stayed with me. The next day, I started getting weird emails and messages. At first, they seemed like junk mail, but then they became more personal. The messages had details about my life that no one should know. They were threatening me, saying I would be kidnapped and end up like the people in that live stream. I tried to ignore them, but they kept coming, getting more frequent and threatening. It was clear I had been hacked. I changed my passwords and installed security software, but nothing helped. The messages just kept coming, each one more frightening than the last. One night, I got a message with a video of my house from outside. The message said, "We know where you live. You're next." I knew I had to do something. I contacted the police, but they couldn't do much. Tracking people on the dark web is really hard. I felt trapped and scared. The threats got so bad that I couldn't stay in my own home anymore. I decided to move my family out of the country. We packed up and moved to Canada, hoping to escape the nightmare. Even now, living in a new place, I still feel scared. The images of those creepy creatures and their victims haunt my dreams. The dark web is not a safe place. It's full of terrible things. I learned that the hard way, and I hope my story warns others. Stay away from the dark web. Some things are better left unseen.